Evelyn, from the moment you walked into my life, you challenged me, frustrated me, but most of all, you changed me. You saw the man beneath the name, the flaws beneath the perfection. And yet, you stayed.
Nathan.
I used to believe love was just another transaction, something measured, something calculated. But you taught me it's chaos, it's raw, it's terrifying, and it's the only thing I never want to live without.
Nathan, what are you?
I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I don't want another day, another second, without knowing you're mine. So, Evelyn, will you marry me?
Chief Desmond Williams sat in his vast, luxurious study, surrounded by towering shelves of books and expensive artwork. Outside the large glass windows, the city lights twinkled, but his heart felt heavy with worry. He had built a business empire from scratch, turning a small logistics company into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. People admired him for his sharp mind, his strategic thinking, and his relentless pursuit of success. But despite all his wealth and power, he felt like a failure in the one thing that mattered most, his son's happiness. Nathan, his only child, had never truly experienced love. Growing up in privilege, he had been surrounded by wealth and admiration. But Desmond feared that his son had never been loved for who he truly was. Women flocked to Nathan, but Desmond could see through their intentions. Most were drawn to his last name, his status, and the security that came with it. Nathan himself had grown cold toward relationships, believing love was nothing more than an illusion. His own mother, Desmond's late wife, had lived a lonely life despite being married to a billionaire. Theirs had been an arranged marriage, one of status and convenience, not love. She had died with regret in her eyes, and Desmond had vowed that his son would not suffer the same fate. Now, at 65, with his health beginning to decline, Desmond knew time was running out. He needed to ensure that Nathan found a woman who loved him not for his wealth, but for the man he was beneath the suit and status. He had considered different approaches, arranging a marriage like his parents had done, forcing Nathan into relationships, or even hiring a private investigator to find the right woman. But he knew that none of these would guarantee true love. Nathan needed to find love naturally, without manipulation or pressure. Then, one evening, an idea struck him, a bold, unconventional plan that could change everything. Instead of controlling Nathan's love life from the shadows, Desmond decided to place himself at the heart of the company in a different role. Not as the billionaire CEO, but as a lowly gatekeeper. He would step away from his empire, fake his disappearance, and observe from a different perspective. If there was a woman in Nathan's life who truly cared for him, she would not be drawn in by his wealth, and she would treat even the lowest-ranked workers with respect. To execute his plan, he took drastic steps. He transferred company control to Nathan, telling him he was going away on a long-term business retreat. He then changed his appearance, shaving his head and growing a beard, dressing in worn-out clothes instead of his usual tailored suits. He used his power to quietly arrange a position for himself as the new gatekeeper at Williams Corporation's headquarters, under the name Mr. Patrick. With his identity concealed, Desmond watched as Nathan took on the pressures of leading the company alone. He also began searching for the woman who would love his son, not for his billions, but for his heart. Nathan Williams stood in the grand office that once belonged to his father, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. The leather chair behind the massive mahogany desk felt too big, too imposing. It had only been a week since his father's so-called business retreat, but the weight of responsibility was already crushing him. He sighed, staring at the endless reports on his desk. Sales projections, employee concerns, board meetings. Things he had never truly paid attention to when his father was around. Leading the company wasn't the problem. He had studied business management and had been involved in operations for years. But something about the way people treated him now felt off. Before, employees had always been polite, respectful, maybe even a little fearful. But now, as CEO, he noticed the shift. People were too careful around him, their words rehearsed, their laughter forced. "Sir, we'll handle it. Don't worry." "Yes, Mr. Nathan, whatever you decide." Even in meetings, no one challenged his ideas. They all agreed with him, even when he wasn't sure he was right. It was frustrating. His father had built this empire by surrounding himself with strong-willed people who weren't afraid to speak their minds. But now, Nathan wasn't sure if people respected him or if they just feared disappointing the billionaire's son. The only person who didn't seem afraid of him was Mr. Patrick, the new gatekeeper. The old man had an attitude that irritated and intrigued him at the same time. One morning, as Nathan walked into the office, Mr. Patrick gave him a long, slow look before shaking his head. "You look exhausted, young man. Did you even sleep?" Nathan frowned. No one spoke to him like that. "That's not really your business, is it?" Mr. Patrick shrugged. "It is when you come in looking like you fought a lion in your dreams. If you're gonna run this company, you better start looking the part. Confidence, son." Nathan had half a mind to remind the gatekeeper who he was talking to, but something about the man's words stuck with him. Confidence. He had always thought he had plenty of it. But was it real confidence, or just the security of his father's presence? The struggles didn't stop there. A crisis was brewing. One of their biggest clients, Sterling Exports, had suddenly backed out of a multimillion-dollar deal, citing a lack of confidence in Nathan's leadership. Rumors spread. Investors started questioning his ability to run the company. Nathan was furious. "So what? Just because my father isn't here, they think I can't handle it?" he snapped in a board meeting. His executives exchanged uneasy glances, none of them willing to challenge him. All except one. A woman's voice cut through the silence. "Maybe it's not about your father. Maybe they just don't know who you are yet." Nathan turned, eyes locking onto Evelyn, the new secretary. Unlike the others, she wasn't nervous or overly polite. She simply met his gaze, waiting for his reaction. And for the first time since taking over, Nathan found himself speechless. Evelyn Daniels had been at Williams Corporation for only 2 weeks, but she had already made an impression. Unlike most employees, she wasn't intimidated by wealth or status. She had grown up in a modest home, raised by a single mother who taught her that a person's worth wasn't measured by their bank account, but by their character. Her job as a secretary wasn't glamorous, but she was good at it. Organized, efficient, and never afraid to speak her mind. That was exactly how she ended up on Nathan Williams' radar. The day after she boldly spoke in the boardroom, questioning Nathan's leadership, the office was buzzing. No one had ever dared to address the young CEO so directly, at least not since his father left. "You really have a death wish," her colleague whispered as they walked past Nathan's office. Evelyn shrugged. "I just said what everyone was thinking." What she didn't realize was that Nathan had been watching her. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a secretary. Most employees either flattered him or stayed out of his way. But Evelyn, she was different. Later that day, Nathan called her into his office. She walked in, unfazed, while other employees would have been nervous. "You spoke pretty boldly in that meeting," Nathan said, leaning back in his chair. Evelyn met his gaze without hesitation. "Was I wrong?" Nathan opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. The truth was, she wasn't wrong. People didn't trust him yet, not because he lacked skills, but because he had never truly connected with them. His father had built relationships over decades, while Nathan had always stayed in the background. Instead of admitting that, he smirked. "You're not afraid to lose your job, are you?" Evelyn folded her arms. "If you fire people for honesty, then maybe Sterling Exports was right to back out." Nathan's amusement faded. This woman wasn't just bold, she was sharp. Meanwhile, Mr. Patrick, Desmond, had been watching their interaction from afar, pretending to clean a window near the hallway. He liked this girl. She wasn't impressed by wealth, nor did she bow to power. That evening, as Evelyn left work, Mr. Patrick stopped her at the gate. "You got guts, young lady," he said with a small smile. Evelyn chuckled. "Someone has to say what needs to be said." Mr. Patrick nodded, watching her walk away. For the first time, he thought he might have found the woman he was looking for. Nathan wasn't sure why Evelyn got under his skin so easily. Maybe it was because she didn't treat him like the almighty CEO. Or maybe it was because, unlike everyone else, she didn't hesitate to put him in his place. The day after their boardroom exchange, Nathan walked into the office determined to test her. He wasn't used to being challenged, and a part of him wanted to see if she was really as fearless as she seemed. "Evelyn," he called out as he stepped out of his office. She was typing at her desk, completely focused, but she looked up without the nervous energy he was so used to from employees. "Yes, sir." Nathan leaned against her desk, crossing his arms. "You seem to have a lot of opinions about leadership." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "I do." He smirked. "Since you think I'm doing such a terrible job, maybe you should run the company." Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "That's the problem, Mr. Williams. You think leadership is about power. It's not. It's about connection." Nathan blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever spoken to him like this. "Connection," he repeated. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "Yes. People don't follow titles. They follow people they believe in. Right now, they see you as the billionaire's son, not as a leader. That's why Sterling Exports pulled out. That's why your employees hesitate to talk to you." Nathan felt something unfamiliar, an uneasy mix of frustration and admiration. She was right, but he hated hearing it from her. "Interesting theory," he said. "And what exactly do you suggest I do?" Evelyn shrugged. "Talk to people. Not just from behind your desk. Learn their names. Ask about their families. Show them you're more than just your father's replacement." Nathan stared at her for a moment. No one had ever spoken to him this way. Not his board members, not his friends, not even his father. Before he could respond, Mr. Patrick, the gatekeeper, walked past, overhearing their conversation. He smiled to himself. Evelyn was exactly the kind of woman he had been hoping to find for his son. As Nathan walked back into his office, he realized something unsettling. He wasn't just intrigued by Evelyn's words. He was intrigued by her. Nathan wasn't sure why he started noticing Evelyn more, but he did. It wasn't just because of her sharp tongue or the way she challenged him. It was the little things, the things she did when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, as he stepped out of his office, he saw Evelyn near the break room. The janitor, an older woman named Mama Ruth, was struggling to lift a heavy stack of papers. Several employees walked past, pretending not to notice. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She immediately set her things down and helped. "You don't have to do that," Mama Ruth said, surprised. Evelyn smiled. "And you don't have to do it alone." Nathan stood there, watching. No cameras. No audience. Just pure kindness. The next day, it happened again. During lunch, Nathan passed through the cafeteria and saw Evelyn sitting with a young intern, Daniel, who looked unusually stressed. I can't afford to mess up," Daniel muttered. "If I lose this internship, I don't know how I'll pay for school." Evelyn handed him half of her sandwich. "Eat first. Then we'll figure it out." Nathan found himself staring. She wasn't rich, yet she gave so easily. Later that evening, as employees filed out for the day, Nathan noticed Mr. Patrick watching Evelyn from the security booth, a thoughtful expression on his face. "She's something, isn't she?" Mr. Patrick said casually. Nathan frowned, crossing his arms. "Why do you care?" Mr. Patrick chuckled. "You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat those who have nothing to offer." Nathan didn't respond. He didn't want to admit it, but the old man was right. The next morning, Nathan made his way down to the lobby, deliberately walking through the entrance instead of taking the private elevator. He wanted to see something. Evelyn was already there, chatting with Mr. Patrick at the gate. "You again," she teased. "You sure you don't get bored standing here all day?" Mr. Patrick grinned. "Not when interesting people stop by." Nathan cleared his throat, making his presence known. Evelyn turned, raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Williams." Nathan hesitated, then finally said, "You helped Mama Ruth yesterday." Evelyn shrugged. "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to her," Nathan replied. For a second, Evelyn looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected him to notice. Then, with a small smile, she said, "Well, maybe you should try it sometime." Nathan smirked, but her words stayed with him. Later that day, when he saw an overwhelmed employee struggling with a load of files, he picked up half without thinking. The employee froze. "Sir, you don't have to." "I know," Nathan said simply. Mr. Patrick, watching from a distance, smiled. His plan was working. Nathan had always believed love was a transaction. He had seen it time and time again. People fawning over his wealth, pretending to care, only to reveal their true intentions when money was involved. But Evelyn was different. She didn't care about status. She wasn't impressed by power. And most of all, she didn't try to please him. She was just herself. And that was exactly why he couldn't stop thinking about her. It started with small things, like the way he unconsciously looked for her in the office every morning. Or how his mood lifted when he heard her laugh from across the room. She had this way of making people feel comfortable, like they belonged. It was a quality he envied. One evening, as Nathan walked toward the entrance, he saw Evelyn standing outside, waiting for a cab. "Working late?" he asked, stopping beside her. She glanced at him, then nodded. "Yeah. Daniel needed help with a report, so I stayed back." Nathan smirked. "You do realize that's not in your job description, right?" Evelyn chuckled. "I know. But not everything has to be." Nathan fell silent, watching the city lights reflect in her eyes. There was something refreshing about her. She wasn't trying to be special, she just was. A light drizzle began to fall. Evelyn held out her hand, catching raindrops with a small smile. "Looks like I'll be getting wet today." Without thinking, Nathan shrugged off his suit jacket and held it over her head. Evelyn blinked in surprise. "What are you doing?" "Keeping you dry," he said, avoiding her gaze. She studied him for a moment before shaking her head with a smirk. "I didn't know billionaires had chivalry in them." Nathan rolled his eyes. "We do. We just don't use it often." Her cab pulled up, and as she got in, she glanced at him again. For the first time, there was something unreadable in her expression. "Thanks, Nathan." He froze. She had never called him by his first name before. As the cab drove off, Nathan ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath. He was in trouble. Mr. Patrick, who had been watching from the gate, chuckled to himself. His son was finally falling. Nathan wasn't sure when it happened, but somewhere between her sharp comebacks and her small acts of kindness, Evelyn had become the one person he looked forward to seeing every day. And that scared him. One evening, after a long day, Nathan stepped outside to find Evelyn sitting alone near the company's small garden, sipping a bottle of water. She looked exhausted but peaceful, staring at the sky. Without thinking, he walked over. "Mind if I join you?" Evelyn glanced up, clearly surprised. The mighty CEO sitting in the dirt with a lowly secretary. What will the world think? Nathan smirked and sat down anyway. "I think the world will survive." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cool night air wrapped around them, and the distant hum of city traffic filled the silence. It wasn't awkward, it was comfortable. "You know," Evelyn finally said, "when I first got this job, I thought you were going to be one of those arrogant rich guys who barely acknowledge people like me." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Evelyn turned to face him, studying him for a moment before saying, "I think there's more to you than you let people see." Nathan wasn't used to people seeing him, really seeing him. Most looked at his last name, his wealth, or his power. But Evelyn, she looked at him like he was just Nathan. He exhaled, leaning back on his hands. "Can I tell you something?" Evelyn nodded. He hesitated, then said, "Sometimes, I don't think I deserve this job." Evelyn blinked, clearly not expecting that. "Why would you say that?" Nathan let out a dry chuckle. "Because I didn't earn it the way my father did. He built this company from nothing. Me. I just walked into a position people worked their whole lives for." Evelyn frowned. "Nathan, do you really think leadership is about who suffered the most to get there?" He shrugged. "Isn't it?" She shook her head. "No. Leadership is about what you do once you're there. And from what I've seen, you actually care about this company. That's more than I can say for a lot of CEOs." Nathan turned to her, caught off guard. No one had ever reassured him like that before. Evelyn smiled. And besides, if you were truly terrible at this, I would have told you by now. Nathan laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Something about her made him feel lighter. A few feet away, Mr. Patrick watched from his post at the gate, smiling to himself. His son had finally found someone who saw him. Not his last name, not his billions, but his heart. Nathan had never been in love before. Not real love, anyway. Sure, he had been in relationships, if you could even call them that. Women who smiled too brightly at his last name. Dates filled with rehearsed laughter and calculated compliments. But with Evelyn, everything was different. And that terrified him. One afternoon, Mr. Patrick, still disguised as the company gatekeeper, decided it was time to test Evelyn. Did she care about Nathan? Or was she just another woman drawn to power? So, he made his move. Evelyn was leaving the office when Mr. Patrick called her over. "Got a second, young lady?" Evelyn smiled. "For you. Always." Mr. Patrick chuckled. He liked her. But liking her wasn't enough. He needed to be sure. "Tell me something," he said, crossing his arms. "What do you really think about Nathan?" Evelyn blinked. "Nathan?" "Yes, Nathan. Not Mr. Williams. Not the CEO. Just Nathan." Evelyn hesitated, then sighed. "He's stubborn, a little arrogant, and doesn't like being told he's wrong." Mr. Patrick smirked. "Sounds about right." "But," Evelyn continued, her voice softer now, "he's also kind. More than people give him credit for. And even though he acts like he has everything under control, I know he carries a lot of pressure on his shoulders." Mr. Patrick raised an eyebrow. "And that matters to you?" Evelyn frowned. "Of course, it does. Nathan isn't just some billionaire to me. He's a person. A person who's trying to be better. And I respect that." That was all Mr. Patrick needed to hear. But the real test wasn't over yet. That same evening, a rumor started spreading in the office. Nathan was losing control of the company. A false report was leaked that he had mishandled a major deal, and investors were pulling out. Some employees whispered that the board was planning to replace him. Fear spread like wildfire. Nathan knew it was a test. His father was behind this. He wanted to see who would stand by him. And so, he waited. Evelyn found him standing alone on the rooftop, staring at the city below. She walked up to him. "Are the rumors true?" Nathan didn't turn. "Would it matter?" Evelyn sighed. "It would matter because I'd want to help." Nathan finally looked at her, his eyes searching hers. No hesitation. No doubt. She wasn't here for his wealth. She was here for him. A slow smile formed on his lips. "You're really not afraid, are you?" Evelyn smirked. "Of you? Never." From the shadows, Mr. Patrick watched with pride. The test was over. Evelyn had passed. Nathan had never been good at expressing emotions. He could negotiate million-dollar deals, command boardrooms, and handle high-stakes decisions. But when it came to his heart, he was completely lost. And Evelyn. She made it worse. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that he couldn't imagine his life without her. One evening, as the office emptied out, Nathan found himself standing outside the building, waiting. He didn't know exactly what he was waiting for, until he saw her. Evelyn walked out, scrolling through her phone, unaware of his presence. Nathan took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Evelyn." She looked up, surprised. "Nathan, what are you still doing here?" Nathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I needed to talk to you." Evelyn tilted her head. "About what?" He hesitated for a second, then finally said, "You." Evelyn blinked. "Me?" Nathan nodded, stepping closer. "Evelyn, you've been driving me insane." She raised an eyebrow. "Wow, what a romantic start." Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "I mean it. I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I see you, I feel like I finally have something real in my life." Evelyn's teasing smile faded. "Nathan, I know I'm not the easiest person to be around," he continued, his voice softer now. I know I can be difficult. But you make me want to be better. You make me feel like I'm not just my father's shadow. Evelyn stared at him, and for the first time, Nathan felt vulnerable. Then, she smiled. A small, genuine smile. Nathan, do you know how long I've been waiting for you to say that? He blinked. Wait, what? Evelyn chuckled. I may have been a little impatient, but I knew you'd figure it out eventually. Nathan let out a breath of relief, laughing. And here I thought I was about to embarrass myself. Evelyn smirked. Oh, you definitely were. Nathan shook his head before taking her hand, his voice firm yet gentle. So, will you take a chance on me? Evelyn squeezed his hand, her eyes full of warmth. I already have. Evelyn had always liked Mr. Patrick. He was wise, kind, and had a way of making people feel comfortable, even when things at work were chaotic. But she never expected that he was hiding something this big. It happened one morning when Evelyn walked into the office and saw the entire company buzzing. Whispers filled the air. Employees were exchanging confused glances, and some even looked nervous. What's going on? She asked Daniel, the intern. Haven't you heard? Daniel whispered. Mr. Patrick, the gatekeeper, is actually Mr. Williams, the founder of the company. Evelyn froze. Wait, what? Before Daniel could answer, she heard Nathan's voice behind her. It's true. She turned to see him standing there, a small smile on his face. My father has been pretending to be a gatekeeper this whole time. Evelyn's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mr. Patrick, the kind old man she had shared conversations with, laughed with, and respected, was actually the billionaire behind everything? Why would he do that? She finally asked. Nathan chuckled. Because he's unconventional. And because he wanted to test you. Evelyn blinked. Test me. Just then, Mr. Patrick himself walked into the office, dressed in a crisp, expensive suit instead of his usual security uniform. The entire office went silent as he made his way toward her. Good morning, Evelyn, he greeted warmly. Evelyn still couldn't believe what she was seeing. Sir, I don't understand. Mr. Patrick smiled. I needed to be sure that my son was surrounded by the right people. And more importantly, I needed to know if the woman who had caught his heart was someone who saw him, not his wealth. Evelyn swallowed. So, you knew all along. Mr. Patrick chuckled. I knew from the first moment you put my arrogant son in his place. Nathan rolled his eyes. Gee, thanks, Dad. Evelyn shook her head, still overwhelmed. I don't know whether to be impressed or upset. Mr. Patrick grinned. How about both? Evelyn let out a small laugh, shaking her head. This family was something else. But deep down, she knew one thing for sure, she had passed the test. Nathan had spent most of his life trying to prove himself, to his father, to the board, and even to himself. But for the first time, he wasn't chasing approval. He was chasing something real. After his father revealed the truth about his identity, the office was buzzing with speculation. Some employees wondered if Nathan had only gotten his position because of his last name. Others questioned if he was truly capable of leading the company. Nathan knew he had to earn their trust. So, he did something unexpected. One morning, he gathered the entire staff in the main conference hall. The room was packed, filled with employees who had worked under him but never really knew him. Nathan took a deep breath. No scripts. No rehearsed speech. Just the truth. I know some of you doubt me, he started, his voice steady. And I don't blame you. A few employees exchanged glances, clearly caught off guard. Nathan continued, I walked into this company with a last name that gave me everything, but I've spent every day since trying to be worthy of it. And I won't stand here and pretend I've always done things right. Silence filled the room. He had their attention. But what I can promise you is this, I'm not here because of privilege. I'm here because I care. I care about this company. I care about the people who make it what it is. And I will spend every single day proving that to you. There was a pause, then, slowly, employees began to nod. It wasn't an instant victory, but it was a start. Later that evening, as Nathan walked toward the exit, he saw Evelyn standing by the door, arms crossed. "That was impressive," she said. Nathan smirked. "Coming from you, that's high praise." Evelyn shook her head with a smile. "You didn't need to prove yourself to me, you know." Nathan looked at her, his expression soft. "I wasn't just proving myself to them. I was proving myself to myself, too." Evelyn studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Well, in that case, I think you passed." Nathan chuckled. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. Nathan had never been this nervous in his life. Not during his first board meeting. Not when he took over the company. Not even when he had confessed his feelings to Evelyn. But today was different. Standing in the beautifully decorated rooftop garden of the company, Nathan adjusted his suit and exhaled deeply. This was it. Evelyn arrived a few minutes later, looking around in surprise. Fairy lights twinkled above, and the soft sound of a violin played in the background. A table was set with candles and fresh flowers, but what caught her attention most was Nathan, standing there, waiting for her. She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, what's all this?" Nathan chuckled, his nervousness barely hidden. "A dinner. A special one." Evelyn smirked. "Fancy. What's the occasion?" Nathan gestured for her to sit, and as they ate, he reminisced about their journey, from their first sarcastic exchanges to the moments that changed everything. "I never believed in love," Nathan admitted, swirling his wine glass. "Not the kind that isn't tied to money or status. But then, you came along." Evelyn tilted her head, her playful smirk fading. Nathan stood up, reaching into his pocket. Evelyn's breath hitched as he got down on one knee. "Nathan." He took her hand, his eyes locked onto hers. No fear. No hesitation. Just love. "Evelyn, you saw me when no one else did. You stood by me when the world doubted me. You made me believe that I could be more than just a last name." Evelyn blinked rapidly, her eyes glistening. Nathan took a deep breath. "And I don't want to spend another day without you." He opened the velvet box, revealing a breathtaking ring. "Evelyn, will you marry me?" For the first time, Evelyn was speechless. She looked at him, this man who had once been a stranger, then a challenge, then everything. A slow smile spread across her face. "Well, it took you long enough." Nathan laughed, relief washing over him. "Is that a yes?" Evelyn rolled her eyes before nodding. "Yes, you idiot. It's a yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms, holding her like he never wanted to let go. And from a distance, Mr. Patrick smiled. His plan had worked. The wedding was small but elegant, held in the garden of the Williams estate. Close friends, family, and a few trusted employees filled the space, but to Nathan, only two people truly mattered today, Evelyn and his father. As he stood near the altar, adjusting his cufflinks, Mr. Patrick walked up beside him. "Nervous?" his father asked with a knowing smile. Nathan exhaled. "Terrified." Mr. Patrick chuckled. "Good. That means it's real." Nathan turned to him, his expression softer now. "Dad, thank you." Mr. Patrick raised an eyebrow. "For what? Pretending to be a gatekeeper and meddling in your love life?" Nathan smirked. "For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." His father's playful expression turned serious. "Nathan, I never doubted you. I just needed you to see what I've seen in you all along." Nathan swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Mr. Patrick patted his son's shoulder. "You are my greatest success." Before Nathan could respond, the music started playing. All thoughts vanished the moment he saw Evelyn. She walked down the aisle, stunning in an elegant white dress, her eyes locked onto his. His heart raced. As she reached him, she whispered, "You're staring." Nathan smirked. "Can you blame me?" The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows, laughter, and the occasional sarcastic remark from Evelyn that made Nathan bite back a laugh. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Nathan didn't hesitate. As they kissed, applause erupted, and Mr. Patrick wiped a tear from his eye. Later, at the reception, Mr. Patrick raised his glass for a toast. To my son, who thought he was searching for love but instead found someone who truly saw him. And to Evelyn, for proving that love isn't about wealth, it's about finding the right partner. Evelyn grinned. And for tolerating his stubbornness. Everyone laughed, and Nathan shook his head. I knew that was coming. As the night went on, Nathan pulled Evelyn close, whispering, "You changed my life." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you changed mine." Mr. Patrick watched them, his heart full. His job was done. His son was happy.